Hello everyone. Today I'm going to share with you a novel with a roller coaster plot. The love between Mary and Ryker is full of ups and downs. They have to deal with power struggles within the clan and external hostile forces. When Mary saw Ryker injured in battle, bleeding profusely, her heart was shattered. However, in this darkest hour, Mary discovered the strength within her and she's determined to protect their love and clan alongside Ryker. 30. Mary's eyelids fluttered open, only to be assaulted by the intense afternoon sunlight flooding the bedroom. She squinted, her observant nature momentarily overwhelmed by the brightness. With a soft groan, she attempted to roll over into her pillow, but a strong, muscular arm halted her movement. Her eyes widened as she glanced down at her waist, her shy nature causing a faint blush to creep across her cheeks. She found herself in Ryker's bed, his deep, steady breathing warm against her skin. His face was nestled in the crook of her neck, his powerful frame pressed against her back. Every point of contact between them hummed with an otherworldly energy that made tingles. Mary could sense a part of Ryker's soul within her, a comforting warmth unlike anything she had ever experienced. It filled her heart with an unfamiliar, potent aura, and she instinctively knew it was Ryker and his wolf. Curiously, she felt their confidence seeping into her, bolstering her typically shy demeanor. Carefully, Mary turned in Ryker's arms until she faced him. His eyes remained closed, his breathing deepened even. She still struggled to comprehend the reality Ryker, this strong, confident, and undeniably handsome man, was her mate. Her curious gaze traveled from his striking features down his neck to his body. With Ryker still asleep, Mary took the opportunity to study him in the revealing sunlight. Her eyes traced the hard, muscular planes of his chest down to his chiseled ABS. Her mate was the epitome of strength and masculinity. Tentatively, she lifted the covers slightly, allowing more light to illuminate his lower body. When her gaze landed on what she sought, Mary's face flushed a deep crimson, her shy nature reasserting itself. As she marveled at Ryker's impressive physique, she noticed a change in his breathing pattern. Her eyes darted up to find him already watching her, his hazel eyes hazy with sleep, but unmistakably interested. For a moment, they remained motionless, content in each other's embrace, shielded from the outside world. Ryker made the first move, removing his arm from her waist to take her hand. He slowly intertwined their fingers, both of them marveling at the powerful mate tingles spreading through their palms. The sensation was overwhelmingly intense. "Good morning, Luna," he said, his voice a sleepy, husky rumble that sent a shiver down Mary's spine. "Luna." Mary cowled and stopped the smile from spreading across her face. Then she bit the inside of her cheek to stop her from making a fool of herself. But when she saw that one corner of his lips lifted into a half smile, she cowled and stopped the smile from growing. "Good morning," she said shyly. In the romantic human novels that Mary had read in the past, she noticed that the authors would often describe how beautiful the male character looked. Sometimes, Mary would find herself a little cynical and scoff at the description. No man alive would be that perfect. But now that she was staring at Ryker, she realized why the authors were so intent on describing the main character's features. It was to capture the hearts of the readers, nor was it to make the main male characters appealing at all. No, it was simply put out there to allow the readers a chance to see through a glass prism and see what the main female character was feeling. The missing pieces fall into place for the reader's love and infatuation for the main male character without them realizing that even though the character had flaws, they were beautiful through their loved one's eyes. Ryker's black hair fell over his forehead with a carelessness that added to his sexy bad boy persona. Although he had slight bags underneath his eyes from the lack of sleep, he looked handsome either way. This male chose her as his. She was his mate, his Luna. Suddenly, frightened at the idea that this might be a little too much for her to handle, she pushed against him a little too hard. Ryker wasn't prepared for that reaction at all. He flipped harshly onto his back with a grunt just as she rolled off the bed and fell onto the ground. her body covered with the sheets as it slid off Ryker's body. Mary landed with a thump. "Oh," she groaned. "Are you okay?" Ryker asked as his head popped over the edge of the bed to look at her. Mary had hit her elbows on the hard bedroom floor, but she wasn't injured anywhere else. "I'm fine." Mary rolled onto her back and looked up at Ryker. There was mirth lingering in those gorgeous hazel eyes. His half-smile turned into a full-blown smile and she could see the whites of his teeth. He began chuckling and laughing. A pout appeared on her face. "This is not funny." Ryker nodded his head. "It's funny." Mary fought with the sheets to stand up. When she stood up completely, Ryker was sitting on the ends of the bed, completely oblivious to his without-clothes-ness. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close, burying his face into her breast. "Are you regretting last night?" he asked. Something strange stirred in her stomach. Mary felt an edge of insecurity and realized it was coming from Ryker. Her heart softened immediately and without thinking. She ran her fingers through his hair. "No, I'm not," she replied. Ryker pulled back to look at her. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I am yours." He broke into a confident grin again. Their emotions were all over the place. She knew it was because both of them were still getting used to the mate bond and distinguishing their own emotions from each other. "What are your plans today?" Ryker asked. "I was thinking about going back to work," she replied. Ryker frowned. "Why?" he asked. "You don't have to work." "I do have to work. I do have to work," she replied almost immediately. Although Mary was his Luna and would love to enjoy the pampering of her alpha, she didn't want to entirely depend on him. "Are you doubting my ability to take care of you?" "Of course not." Mary thought her words carefully because obviously she didn't want to wound Ryker's ego. "Although I would enjoy your pampering, I still want to continue doing what I do best." Ryker was silent for a minute as he debated over letting Mary work with Easton or keeping her home all to himself. The jealous and selfish part of him wanted Mary all to himself. However, the logical part of him knew that this was important to Mary. "Besides, who said I can't have both? You're pampering and doing what I love." Ryker smirked when he heard what she said. Mary had a point. On another note, Mary was no longer available. His mark on her neck was proof. Ryker agreed with Mary and allowed her to continue working with Easton. With that decision, he made use of whatever little time they had left before he meeting everyone. Ryker spent his time worshipping her body and making love to her repeatedly until she fell asleep. It was late into the afternoon when Ryker finally opened his mind to his pack. They couldn't hear him, but they could feel his emotions. Mary was still sleeping upstairs, and he was downstairs cooking up some late breakfast, something he doesn't do very often. Ryker's guard was down, but as soon as he let down his guard there was a knock at his front door. Turning off the stove, he unwrapped his apron and tossed it on the kitchen counter before going to answer. When the door opened, he saw that it was Ethan, the enforcer that went hunting with him that night and also tracked down Ava's body. Although Ethan was younger than Ryker and the least inexperienced amongst his enforcers, Ethan was loyal, dedicated, and ambitious. "Alpha," he greeted immediately, but his expression made Ryker's blood run cold. "Something has happened." Ethan's face was white as a sheet of paper. His eyes were wide and frantic. "What happened?" "Something happened when we were patrolling the south border." Ryker heard movement behind him. He knew that Mary was awake and walking his way. He listened to see if she would move closer, but she must have got the idea that it was a good time. She remained far back enough to not get noticed, but near enough to hear what was being said. "They attacked us. It happened so quickly. None of us were prepared. By rogues. A fog blinded us. We couldn't see anything, and the weird thing was when we inhaled the mist, it numbed around strength. All of us were getting light-headed. They severely injured Beta Abraham and Gary. Alpha. They are in the hospital right now." Ethan's words sent an knife through Ryker's gut. They hurt his brother, and Ryker was home with Mary. Familiar disgust and anger pulsed through him. Ryker hasn't changed. He was still the same old irresponsible fool. He couldn't even protect his family. Mary was by his side. She grabbed on his arm. Ethan looked at her in surprise, not expecting her to be in the Alpha's home. As soon as his eyes slid down to the mark on her neck, his eyeballs were about to pop out of their socket. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came. Ryker, we need to go see your brother and Gary. Mary hoped to redirect his inner turmoil away from the trail of darkness and focus on what was important. She watched Ryker's throat worked with emotions, his jaw ticking with clear anger. She could feel her guts churning with so much pain and anguish. Ethan still looked lost. His mouth was still gaping open and his eyes were still wide as saucers. Obviously, this came out of shock. He knew that Mary was someone special to Ryker and heard rumors about their budding relationship, but to witness this with his own eyes, it was unbelievable. Mary turned to look at Ethan. Ethan couldn't believe it. Mary looked plain at first glance, but any sensible male who took their time to really look at her would know there was more to her than what meets the eyes. Mary's left hand moved to cover the mark on her neck, but Ryker's hand stopped her from covering it. "Yes, your Luna. You will give her your loyalty and protection the same way you would for me," Ryker said. Ethan's mouth snapped shut. He half nodded, half shook his head as if to clear his mind. Yes, of course. Ethan was about to kneel and pledge his loyalty, slightly dramatic. He was. Ryker grabbed his shoulder to stop him. A simple yes would suffice. Ethan. Oh yes, yes, always. Ethan clearly looked embarrassed. Take me to them. They ran in their wolf forms to get there faster. Mary following between Ethan and Ryker. When they reached the small medical center, Ethan showed them to the medical rooms of Abraham and Gary. In front of the door stood Bruno. When he saw Ryker come in, he moved to open the door for them to enter. Mary and Ryker entered first. Ethan and Bruno followed, and anger was rising quickly inside of Ryker as he took in the sight of Abraham and Gary. They were both unconscious and severely injured. Bruises on their arms and head. "How did you make it out alive?" Ryker asked Ethan. "Abraham and Gary told me to run back and get reinforcements. When I came back with them, they were already bleeding heavily on the ground. We lost a few more border patrols last night," Ethan explained while moving to stand next to Ryker and Mary. Ryker had moved to stand by his brother's side. Mary rarely saw blood. While in her pack, her brother kept her sheltered and away from the fighting fields. When he was injured, he would clean himself up really well before seeing her. He was afraid she'll get worried and upset because she had no one left but him. Now, seeing Abraham and Gary, she was afraid for them. She adored and cared for them deeply. Her eyes slid from Abraham to Gary, who was sleeping on the other bed. Bruno had moved to stand on the other side of Abraham's bed when he saw her move. She walked over to touch the stitch wound on Gary's forehead. "What did the doctor?" Mary stopped mid-sentence because in the middle of turning around to ask Ethan the question. She saw the back of Bruno. Memories flashed before her. The male who poured gasoline on the pack house. His back, it was Bruno. 31. Mary's heart rate sped up. Her palms were sweaty, and she felt slightly nauseous. The air conditioner was running, and she could feel the cool air against her bare skin. But it did little to cool her body, although the first thing that she wanted to do was tell Ryker this was the right time. Her haste could cause more damage than good. "This was my fault. I should have done a better job with managing border patrol," Bruno said while looking down at Abraham. Mary's gut twisted with a mixture of fear and distrust. He sounded so sincere, but Mary knew without a doubt that Bruno was the one who threw the matches onto the gasoline. "Do we know anything from these attacks?" Ryker asked. "No," Bruno answered. He turned around to look at Mary. She tried her hardest to school her emotions. Her heart was racing a mile a minute. She was sure if she cowed and controlled her fear, he could detect a change in her demeanor. Bruno's scrutinizing eyes fell on her. Mary felt like a prey stuck in his crotcheris. Every hair on her body stood at attention. Then it flickered from her face to the crook of her neck. His eyes narrowed with disdain. She watched his eyes slid back up to her, almost accusing her silently. She didn't feel safe at all. And then she shuffled over to Ryker and hid half her body behind his back. Her hands went to clutch his shirt. She practically almost pressed her body against Ryker. She felt so cold underneath Bruno's disapproving gaze that she cowed in help welcoming Ryker's heat. "You marked her," Bruno questioned, but it came out almost as an accusation. "Yes," Ryker responded. Mary felt Ryker's right arm moved back to grasp her hand in his. Without speaking, he was reassuring her she was safe. Instantly, she exhaled. Ryker wouldn't let anyone hurt her. He'll protect her. You rut with her a few times and that was all it took. Ryker's hand tightened on hers, his back tense with unspoken anger. Amid her fear and anxiety, she could discern a burning fire growing in the pit of her stomach. She knew it was Ryker's emotions. "Watch your mouth, Bruno. You think I am the only one that thinks this? There were calamities happening in the pack and you were busy rutting with a female." Bruno was relentless and asking for his death. Funny how it all happened when she entered our territory. The insinuation was there. He wanted to blame Mary. What happened next startled Mary. Ryker released her hand and attacked Bruno. Her mail moved with impressive and inhuman speed. With one blink, he had Bruno struggling against the opposite wall. Ryker bared his canines, peeling his lips back, exerting his dominance of the disrespectful wolf and forcing him to obey. Ryker released a wave of alpha dominance. It coiled in the air and affected all their wolves. Even Ethan lowered his head and downcast his eyes as a sign of obedience. Mary's wolf felt the effect, but Ryker was her mate. She didn't feel the same compulsion to obey. Bruno growled his displeasure. Ryker didn't like it one bit. He threw one hard hit at Bruno's jaw and busted his lips, grabbed Bruno's shirt and threw him like a rag doll across the room. Bruno was a big male, and so he hit the opposite wall with a grunt. Ryker strived toward him, the cold and menacing look in his eyes that Mary never seen before. Placing one foot on Bruno's left wrist, he applied pressure. Bruno grit his teeth and the muscles on his face ticked with pain and anger. "You insulted my mate. I should kill you right here, right now." Bruno didn't say nothing, but his disobedience and reluctance vibrated deep within his chest. Ryker applied more pressure. Ethan refused to step in. His alpha was already on edge. Mary didn't know what to do. Bruno was the person who started the fire. He may have been the person who killed the other pack members, but she wouldn't know. She wanted to tell Ryker, but telling him now was a good idea. If Bruno, someone internally, could betray him, what about the rest of the pack members? Was Ethan loyal? If Ethan was loyal, that means Ryker's odds were not good. She also didn't want to endanger both Gary's and Abraham's life. They were still unconscious. Mary knew very little about fighting. "If it wasn't for our past, I would take your disrespect as a challenge." Ryker's words laced with barely restrained anger. He lifted his foot off of Bruno's wrist. Bruno breathed heavily through his teeth. Although Ryker didn't break his wrist, she could see how bruised it looked. "Leave." Ethan jumped and ran out the door. Bruno looked at his wrist and then slid a dirty look in Mary's direction before walking out. When they were finally alone, Mary walked over to Ryker. Ryker was shaking still. His eyes were closed, and she knew that he was close to shifting. Hoping that her touch could soothe away the anger, she touched his stiff back. Ryker jumped, not expecting her touch, but a moment later, his shoulders sagged and his muscles uncoiled its stiffness. "Who is he?" Mary asked. "One of my older enforcers. She is hard to work with, but he has saved my life several times." Mary thought about what Ryker said. If he said that Bruno had saved his life, why would Bruno harm the pack? It made little sense. Maybe what she was sure on what she saw that night. Ryker turned and wrapped his arms around her. He moved his face to the crook of her neck and inhaled deeply. She wrapped her arms around him and patted gently. "I'm sorry that you had to hear those words. Mary, you don't deserve that kind of disrespect." Ryker apologized. It didn't matter to Mary. Bruno was nobody to him. She has always believed that people can stay whatever they want. What truly matters was that she knew who she was. Mary was a degrading female like how Bruno made her to be. So his mattered little to her. His opinions matter very little to me, Mary admitted. Ryker chuckled before pulling back to look at her. He cupped her face. His eyes were back to its normal light shade of hazel. I don't regret my decision. His eyes traveled to his mark on Mary's neck. He traced the 2 little teeth marks with his fingertip. Out of all the life decisions I made, you are the one I don't regret. She knew he meant it because that was just how the mate bond worked. He couldn't lie to her as she couldn't lie to him. Ryker, Abraham's heart monitor was beeping like crazy. Both Mary and Ryker broke apart. Ryker moved to the monitor screen to look at the vitals. Mary threw open the door to shout for help. In seconds, nurses and doctors filled the small medical room, pushing both Ryker and Mary back. One nurse moved to grab a hold of both their arms and tried to push them out. Alpha, we need the room. Please step outside and let us save him. Ryker pushed the nurse's hand away. His wolf and him wanting to be there for their brother. They both wanted to ensure that Abraham was safe. His heart twisted in pain at the sight of his little brother unconscious body. He lost a lot of blood and sustained multiple chest injuries. We need the room. Alpha, the nurse stressed. Mary took hold of Ryker's arm. Ryker, I know you want to be here for him, but we have to let the doctors do their job. She glances over at Abraham and saw the doctors performing chest compressions. Loud voices and orders were being thrown all over the room. She tugged on Ryker's arm. Ryker, please, listen to me. Ryker's eyes reluctantly flew to Mary and she could see the anguish on his face. However, he listened and stopped fighting the nurse. The nurse pushed them outside of the medical room. The heart monitor was still beeping dangerously as the door slammed shut in front of them. Ryker dropped to the floor, bringing his knees up. He covered his head with his hands, his fingers tugging at his hair as he rocked back and forth. Fuck. 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 He growled angrily. She dropped to her knees in front of him, quickly grabbing his wrists. She tried to pry his hands away. It's not your fault, she assured him. It is my fault. I should have protected him. I should have been there. I should have been the one that was hurt. Ryker snarled. Please, don't do this to yourself. Ryker, it isn't your fault, and if Abraham was awake, he would say the same thing. You don't understand. I left him alone to fend for himself. I was a selfish bastard. I couldn't stand the idea of having to take care of someone. I ran away and now I am doing the same thing all over again. Ryker shook and she could feel so much self-guilt and pain from him. It hurt her so much. She wrapped her arms instantly around him, whispering soothing words into his hair. She wanted to take care of him, for someone to bear some weight on his shoulders. He was allowed to crumble and fall in front of her because she would be there to support him. Hours later, they sat in the waiting room. She was still holding him close to her body, but he had stopped shaking. He buried his face in her chest to hide that fact that he had cried. When Mary heard the little pitter-patter of feet heading their direction, she turned her head to see who it was. One doctor and nurse stood in front of them, their faces sketched with worry and fear. How is he? She whispered. Ryker turned his head to look at the nurse and doctor. Their eyes landed on their alpha before they looked at the ground. Right now, he is okay, but he might go under arrest again. His body is extremely weak. We did everything we can, but his body is not responding well to the human blood we supplied him. Usually, werewolves are receptive to human blood and it can assist in the healing process. But sometimes werewolves who had lost to blood, the human blood will go through their body quickly and do little in healing. The doctor explained. What about werewolf blood? Mary questioned. The doctor nodded his head. Werewolf blood would work, but it has to be akin. Take mine. Ryker stood up from his position. It's not that easy. While your blood may aid him healing, he would need a lot to survive. Take mine. He repeated once again. The doctor's eyes flickered to Mary as if seeking her opinion. But Mary had no say in this. If it was Marcus, she would do the same thing. Finally, the doctor nodded before looking at the nurse. Take him to the room. Perform a direct transfusion. The doctor turned back to Ryker. But you must be careful. Let us know as soon as you start feeling lightheaded. That settled everything. Ryker and Mary followed the nurse back into the medical room and were quickly set up to do a direct transfusion. Their Tito Ryker blinked a few times. The room was spinning. An uncomfortable knot formed in his stomach and the urge to hurl crawled up his throat. Vampire Deception by Drake Mason and E.Y. Gregg. By the undocumented changeling and first to cause of a low-level rich. Mary asked next to him. He felt her fingers on his arm. He blinked and tried to look at her. She handed him an uncapped bottle of water. He brought it to his lips and took large gulps of it. He probably downed 8 to 9 water bottles already. The nurse had already removed the needle. "I'm fine," he grumbled. "He'll need to rest a bit to recover. The nausea should go away soon." The nurse cleaned up, throwing away the needles safely, and tossing away any extra bandages and packages. Opening his eyes was not helping him, so he closed his eyes again and rested his head against the back of the chair. Abraham slept quietly next to him. He could feel Mary kneeling down next to him. All this time, and she didn't leave his side for a second. "You're perfect," he mumbled. A second later, Ryker felt Mary smooth back his hair. Sweat beaded his forehead. His body was fighting what he was feeling. He wanted to be awake, but it was exhausting. Ryker felt at ease. The doctor said that Ryker's blood would help quicken Abraham's healing process. A sigh passed through his lips when he heard the nurse leave. He spoke up again, remembering a memory of when Abraham and him were juveniles. "One night, Abraham and I were living in an abandoned home. We both went out to look for jobs, desperate for some food to fill our stomach. We were gone all day. Abraham went looking for a job, did his best. Never gave up. Well, I ended up in a bar. I saw this human woman. I could smell her arousal from all the way across the room. She knew I wasn't old enough to drink legally, but she still came over to talk to me. She ordered me food and drinks. I ate my fill." Ryker's voice was hoarse as he remembered that night. Shame crawled all over him. I even saved some for Abraham. When I got back to the abandoned home, Abraham was there. He was so hungry. He devoured the food I brought home. Abraham had found a job that day. I had totally forgotten about it. I just wanted to have fun with no responsibility. Ryker's eyes flew open again. He turned his head to look at Mary. She was listening intently. "I'm not a good person. I'm selfish. I hurt the only person who was there for me. That day, I felt exactly how I feel today. Disgust. I'm not worthy. Mary, we all made mistakes. Ryker, but what matters if we learn from them? You'd own that. Ryker, if that was true, you wouldn't be who you are today. Plus, Abraham loves you either way. HES loyal to you. HES your brother. Forgiving you would be the easiest thing in the world. I'm lucky to have you by my side. Mary, I'm glad you kissed me that night." Mary laughed softly before to brush her lips over his lips. A knock sounded at the door. When it opened, Ethan looked at them with a nervousness that made Ryker's wolf raise his hackles. Something was wrong. "There is a large gathering at the pack house," Ethan reported. Ryker frowned. Why would his pack members be at the pack house? It was no longer standing because of the fire. "You should go there," Ethan said with a sense of seriousness that had Ryker's vision slowly clearing up. He was still feeling light-headed and dizzy, but adrenaline was pumping through his veins, erasing any signs of discomfort. Ryker stood up, but his legs shook a little. A wave of exhaustion washed over him, and it forced him to close his eyes. He pinched the bridge of his nose and took deep breaths. "Are you okay? Should I get some enforcers to disperse the crowd? Tell me what you need me to do." Ethan was not trained in this, but people who usually handled pack issues were Abraham, Gary, or him. "Don't worry. I'll go. I just have one hell of a headache," Ryker grumbled. Barry didn't say anything, but Ryker could feel that Mary worried about him. He needed to ensure them he was okay, that he would be able to take care of them. Otherwise, There would be chaos in his pack and he would fail again. Taking another deep breath, he opened his eyes and glanced at Ethan. Let's go. Ryker would have preferred to let Mary stay behind. But pack issues like this, it would be best to have both Alpha and Luna present. He might have not had the chance to introduce her to the pack as his mate, but having her presence there would ensure that everything was okay. So he reluctantly allowed her to tag alone. Abraham and Gary were safe now, so he felt better leaving them in medical center. When they stepped outside of the medical center, Ryker took off his shirt and jean. He handed them to Mary. Ethan also did the same. For a second, he saw a flash of confusion in his mate's eyes. We will have to run in our wolf forms to get there faster. You can ride on my back, but you must hold my clothes for me. She nodded and took Ryker's clothes into her hands, clutching them to her chest. With her mated, it was appropriate for Ethan to hand over his clothes to her. It had his scent on them, so he quickly changed and bite down on his clothes to carry them with his teeth. When Ryker shifted into a big black wolf, she watched his wolf fur bristled in the wind before he stand on all four paws. Making no sound, he took a few steps toward her before lowering his upper body for her to climb on. Mary slid her legs over his body. Her body welcomed the extreme body heat that was radiating from Ryker's wolf. His natural cardamom and clove with hint of sweetness scent was stronger too. It comforted her so much. Instantly, she wrapped her arms around his neck and her head on his back. A few minutes later, they were running through the woods so fast that everything blurred. The way they ran right now differed from the first night they arrived in the pack. It was quicker. She realized that they slowed their pace for her that night. Ryker and Ethan S. Wolf didn't slow down until they were near the pack house. Slowly, the blur of trees stopped and she could see. When Ryker came to a stop, she lifted her head to look around. They were near enough to the pack house, but far enough to still change. It was almost dark outside now. With so much that has happened, a full day flew by. She handed him his clothes after sliding off his body. Ethan had moved to a more private area to shift back. Ryker didn't bother hiding. He shifted in front of her. He pulled on his jean first before grabbing his shirt and pulling it over his head. Alpha, I didn't mention it at the medical center, but the leader of the group is Bruno. Ethan mentioned. Bruno. This news surprised Ryker. Although Bruno and Ryker don't always agree on certains, Ryker has always respected Bruno and trusted him. Could it be? Ryker. Mary looked at Ryker from underneath her eyelashes. She wrung her hands nervously in front of her. Something was bothering her. She licked her suddenly dried lips before speaking. I think I saw Bruno that night. He was the one who threw the matches. When I saw his back at the medical center, his shoulders and the look in his eyes, it reminded me of that night. I'm almost positive it's him, but I heard you say you trust him. I was going to tell you, but then Abraham coded. Betrayal. Ryker could understand why Mary said nothing to him. She has never met Bruno until today, and their mate Bond told him she was lying. Mary was telling the truth. She was going to tell him, but there was no time. He had trusted Bruno. Fury rose like thunder inside of him. It crackled and burned through his veins. He had thought that Bruno only argued against him because he was old and traditional, but not that Bruno was the person behind all that has happened. Growling, Ryker ran toward the pack house. Briefly, he heard Mary calling his name. Ethan rushed to follow his alpha. Blood pounded in his eardrum. When Ryker burst out of the edge of the woods, he saw Bruno standing in the middle of everybody. A group of unknown rogues surrounded him and a few of his pack members, including enforcers that he trained. Ethan and Mary burst out of the woods and stood next to him. Mary realized the number odds between the two groups. She turned to Ethan. She clutched his arm. Go, Ethan. Gather the rest of the enforcers. Tell them that the Alpha is in danger. They need to protect the pack, she said. Run on, stop. Run, shout at the top of your lungs. Ethan. They will chase you and they will try to stop you. But go, she ordered. Ethan cowled and resisted her command. Although a part of him wanted to stay and help protect them, He knew that Bruno's group of loyal underlings outnumbered them. He nodded and burst into a run back into the wood. Just as Ethan disappeared, 3 of Bruno's underlings separated from the group and headed in the direction that Ethan headed. It's too late. Vampire Dissection by Drake Mason and E.Y. Grant. At the undocumented changeling, I'm forced to curse at a low-level rich. I've always known you were too weak for the pack. No matter what I say, you wouldn't listen. You took in a bunch of weak juvels and lost. Ancient and weak wolves. You are not worthy of the alpha title. Ryker laughed coldly. You think you are any better? You prey on the weak to make yourself look strong. All those times you saved me was to gain your trust and control you. But little did I realize how foolish you are. Weak, unfitting for an alpha. Bruno sneered, pacing in front of his underlings with confidence. Enough, Ryker snarled. You want my position. Ryker's stance was one ready to attack. His eyes narrowed and lips peeled back. You think you are better than me? Mary watched a dark shadow pass over Ryker's feature. He was truly furious. A wave of alpha power rolled off him naturally and thickened the air. Bloodlust and determination filled his natural light hazel eyes. It burned with a coldness that made Mary shiver in response. Like a natural predator he was ready to kill. Then try and take it from me. Ryker threatened before shifting into his wolf again. His clothes shredded into tiny pieces. His wolf growled aggressively, baring its sharp teeth at its opponent. Bruno shifted immediately after into a gray wolf that was almost the same size as Ryker. Bruno has issued an alpha challenge. No one can interfere now. Slowly, the circle closed around the 2 dominating wolves, pacing and watching, waiting to see the victor. 33. As the fight began, darkness slowly touched every single corner of the mountain, left no valley or rabbit hole untouched. The only light they had tonight was the shining moon, as if the gods and goddesses were looking down at them. The smell of smoke still tainted the surrounding air. Not a single sound but the low, determined, and vicious growls of the 2 dominating wolves. There were flashes of black and gray fur, almost a blur to the without clothes eye. Mary watched apprehensively. Her mate fought Bruno, with the claws and bites. She realized that Ryker was trained exceptionally. He knew enough to fall back and when to attack. Yet, she feared that Ryker was weaker than he was letting on. Giving Abraham blood might be his demise in this fight. He was putting on a brave front, but she noticed that Bruno had thrown Ryker down more than once, even pinned him over 10 times. But her mate was a fierce alpha male. Her pacing grew panicky when she saw how worn Ryker was becoming. Both dominating wolves were equal in attacks. Bruno's claws were swiping and digging for kills. Ryker was working hard in dodging those hits and trying to get his own lethal blow in. Then Bruno made a mistake that caused him to tumble back. Ryker jumped on the chance and pilfered his claws towards Bruno's stomach. It snagged and tore, but it wasn't a lethal enough blow. Bruno had managed to roll away and back onto his feet. Her eyes flew to the edge of the woods, praying that Ethan was able to beat those 3 rogues. However, her distraction caused her to miss what was happening. A loud whine and whimper had her gaze snapping back to what was happening. Her mate was down on the ground, wounded. Triumph flashed across Bruno's eyes. He stood a little taller on his paws, took a few steps toward Ryker's weak body. She felt like her heart was being ripped out of her chest. Her knees wobbled and fear instilled itself deep inside of her. She couldn't bear to see Ryker like this. Ryker, she screamed inside her head. No, please. Get up. Get up. Mary pleaded, not wanting to interfere with the fight. Bruno shifted back. He stood disgustingly without clothes in front of them all. She wanted to vomit at the sight of him. Did he think he was some kind of god? On Bruno's face, he wore a confident smirk, as if he knew. He had won already. Mary hated him. Hated him more than anything in the world. Hated him for hurting Ryker, her mate. She growled in warning as she watched Bruno sauntered over to Ryker for a finishing blow. Her fingernails dug into the earthy ground. She cowled and stopped the snarl that slipped past her lips again. Bruno stopped and glanced at her. Maybe you'll have some fun with your mate once I am alpha, Bruno taunted. Ryker snarled. Although it was weak, it was enough to give her some hope. That's it, baby. Mary's eyes were back on her mate. Ryker got back onto his paws, but his legs shook terribly. He huffed and puffed, even though she wasn't fighting. Every fiber in her body was screaming in agony. She wanted to run to him. Please don't make this hard on yourself. Ryker stood up completely, and his wolf stood at the same height as Bruno. Then Mary saw a glint of light coming from Bruno. Her attention zoned in on what was in Bruno's hand. He held a knife with a curved blade. Why don't you shift back? I want to kill you fair and square, Bruno taunted, assuming a fighting stance with one leg forward and one back. He lifted one arm up into the air and other held his knife. Let your little mate see you one last time before I end your miserable life. Don't listen to him, Mary shouted, unable to hold back anymore. Tears were streaming down her face. Ryker Wolf's ears perked up upon hearing her voice, but he didn't look in her direction. You're better than him. You fought, and you won. You earned this title. This is your pack. Ryker lunged, a renewed look in his eyes, a surge of energy pulsing through the air. Bruno's confidence wavered as Ryker's jaw locked in on Bruno's right shoulder, the arm that was holding the knife. Snarling, Ryker shook his head. Bruno roared in pain. He grabbed onto the fur on Ryker's neck and pulled, flipping Ryker over onto his back. Ryker rolled over and attacked again. Using his head, he hit Bruno so hard he flew across the field, everyone wide in the circle. Not wanting to interrupt what was happening, Bruno was within range from Mary. She could shift and attack him now. Kill the betraying bastard. But this was a challenge. She cowled and interfere or her mate would lose. She dug her fingers deeper into the earth to keep her from ripping into his body. For the first time in Mary's life, she wanted blood. Ryker shifted into his human, standing tall and proud without clothes. To Bruno's glum arcs were on his chest. He was still bleeding, but he looked so magnificent underneath the moonlight. So beautiful. Her male, her warrior, her alpha, her heart. Ryker broke into a run. She could see how pale he was. He was fighting it so hard. Bruno, already seeing Ryker running, scrambled to stand up. He searched for his knife, his hands scrambling all over the grass for it. Seconds before Ryker reaching him, he found it, lunged for the knife. He grabbed it and swiped it in the air. It slid across Ryker's skin. Her heart leapt in her chest. It was a severe cut. Ryker's eyes met hers fleetingly in her eyes. She willed him to be strong. She begged him to cling on to their mate bond and the strength of it to fight. Ryker gave her a tired smile, as if he was trying to reassure her. Mary thought he was insane, but couldn't help but love this man completely. Behind him, she could see Bruno attacking again, Mary's eyes wide and in terror. Bruno was going to kill Ryker. Words of warning crawled up her throat and were about to leave her mouth when Ryker turned around and wrapped his hands around Bruno's wrist. A loud crack pierced the night sky. Bruno roared in pain. The knife dropped to the ground, spitting around. Ryker hit Bruno's chest with his palm. That blow must have broken a few ribs. She was sure of it. Bruno flew back a few more yards, dropped to his knee and coughed out some blood. Ryker turned his to Mary. She held her breath. The fight wasn't over. It won't be over until one of them dies. Bruno stood up. He laughed like a maniac. Blood stained his chin and down his chest. He looked like a psychopath. That was a good one. He laughed. Ryker stalked towards him and drew a punch. Bruno blocked with his forearm, pushing it away before body slamming into Ryker. He had thought for Ryker to fly back, but Ryker grabbed onto Bruno's arm. Ryker wasn't going anywhere. Ryker flicked Bruno over his shoulder, roaring with fury. Bruno fell onto his back. He groaned out loud at the hard impact. Ryker didn't wait. Her mate kicked Bruno hard in the stomach. He flew across the fields again like a rag doll and stopped a yard in front of Mary. So close to me. Mary snarled in her mind. Just then, they heard loud voices, shouting of enforcers. Reinforcements. Ethan. He got help. The tension in Mary's body let off a bit, but the second she got distracted and let down her guard, Bruno lunged at her and wrapped his arm around her neck. He held her against his body as a shield. You lost. Bruno. Ryker stalked toward them. In his eyes, she could see that he was in complete control, but there was that little glint of gold that shimmered. He was afraid for her life. I don't give a fuck. Bruno snarled, tightening his arms around her neck almost like he was a cornered animal. He was erratic in movement, tugging Mary and almost choking her. If I can't have that alpha title, I'll take your little mate with me. Take her and my enforcers will chase you. There is no safe place on Earth for you. He was still walking towards them but stopped a few yards. Bruno was still inching back. His eyes were looking everywhere. The enforcers arrested the rogues that Bruno brought into the territory. They captured the pack members who have betrayed. Bruno knew he had nothing left. The enforcers moved in, tightening the circle. Bruno stumbled back, shouting and making empty threats. Bruno dragged Mary down a little slope. He lost his footing. It was at this moment Mary made a move. She grabbed onto his arm and bit into hard. Bruno roared in pain. You bitch. He screamed. You'll pay for this. Mary stomped down hard on Bruno's foot like how her brother taught her back in the days. Bruno was caught off guard. It either his or more his foot. He threw her away from his body. Mary went flying. Her body cowed and controlled her fall. Everything happened in slow motion. She could see from the corner of her eyes that Ryker rolled onto the ground before getting onto his knees. Then he stood in one swift move the knife that Bruno used on him spun in the air toward Bruno. Bruno's scream stopped short. She knew that he was dead. There was no doubt about it. But her eyes were on Ryker. As soon as Bruno stopped screaming, Ryker started running towards her, fear in his beautiful hazel eyes. Voices and bodies running towards her just as she fell onto the ground. Her head had hit on something hard. She lost consciousness. Third eye for her. As soon as Mary regained consciousness, she shoots into a sitting position. The abrupt movement and sudden bright lights caused her head to throb painfully. She grimaced and covered her eyes. Shit, she grumbled. Careful. Her mate whispered next to her. Slowly, she opened her eyes, letting the light in air so slowly to prevent shooting pain. You hit your head pretty hard. Ryker sounded worried and upset. When she could finally open her eyes, she looked around the plain medical room. A small beach painting hung on the wall, but it looked so out of place. Her eyes wandered from one side of the room to the other side. There she saw that her mate was sitting on an adjacent bed. Mary looked down her body and noticed that she was wearing matching hospital gowns. Then Mary felt a sharp pain on right temple. She groaned and gently touched the bandage that wrapped around her head. Are you okay? Are you feeling pain? Should I call the doctor to look you over? Mary, answer me. Baby. Ryker was getting riled up by the second. I'm fine. She lifted her head. It just hurts a little. Her injuries were minor compared to Ryker. She looked Ryker over. Although his skin was a little paler than usual and his eyes had dark circles underneath. Are you okay? She asked him. Remember how injured he was during the challenge. Mary shoved away her blanket, moved her feet over the edge of the bed before standing up. The room spun. What are you doing? She heard Ryker moving before he moved to stand in front of her. His firm hands took hold of her shoulders and urged her back into her bed. No, I'm fine. Go back to bed. Instead of listening to Mary, Ryker crawled into bed next to Mary. She scooted back a little to allow Ryker to join her on the tiny hospital bed. The bed squeaked under their weight. Mary was half afraid the bed will collapse, but when it didn't, she settled further into Ryker's side. It was a little crazy. She stepped out of her pack to find love and discover herself. then landed herself in an alpha's lap, a very possessive and loving alpha. Underneath her, she could hear his heartbeat, slow and melodious. It comforted her like nothing else. Ryker's free hand moved up to the side of her face. He threaded his fingers into her hair. The feel of his fingers against her skin made her eyes flutter closed, a soft eye escaping her lips. She realized that she has fallen so deeply in love with Ryker that there was no way she could reverse what she was feeling. Their mate bond was unique, but the fear that coursed through her when she saw how hard he fought, how much he was bleeding. Her heart clenched in her chest. "I thought I was going to lose you," she whispered in a pained voice. His arms tightened around her, and he pressed his lips against her forehead. Right here. He was. That was what mattered. There was a knock at the door before the door slid open. Mary felt Ryker's head lifted. He was looking toward the door. "Good morning," a feminine voice greeted. Mary wanted to see, but Ryker held her face close to his body. It seemed she was the only one feeling this way. They need to be close to each other, to hold and savor their warm bodies pressed against each other. "Yeah, let me help you guys. We got it." Mary fought against Ryker's firm grip and turned her head toward the familiar voices. Her heart felt a huge weight lifted when she saw that Gary and Abraham were okay. Granted, they still had a few bruises and pale. They looked alive and awake. She laughed in relief and happiness. "You guys are okay," she said. Abraham and Gary walked over to sit on the hospital sofa. Both collapsed onto the bed. They were still wearing their hospital gowns. Abraham still had an IV line hooked up to his arm. He put most of his weight onto it to keep himself upright. Once the two settled, they chuckled while looking at Ryker and Mary. "Kind of funny. You know," Abraham smirked. "Vampire deception. By Dwight Mason and E.Y. Dwett, as an undocumented changeling and forced to cove at a well-level witch." Ryker questioned his brother. Ryker remained impassive and unreadable in front of them, but Mary knew that he was happy to see his brother. Abraham waved his hands between them. "We are all in the hospital. Injured." Gary chuckled again and nodded his agreement. "What happened?" Ryker asked. "How did you two get injured?" "It was Bruno. That damn bastard. We thought he was coming with reinforcement, but he attacked us. We were outnumbered and weak at that point. He was there to finish off." Abraham growled. The flash of anger that appeared in his hazel eyes was something that Mary doesn't see often. In the short time that she had been with Abraham, he has always had warm and welcoming eyes. "It was my fault." Mary glanced at Ryker. She could still see he felt guilty. Abraham shook his head immediately. "You don't have to blame yourself. We didn't know that we were feeding a betrayer. None of us knew what was going to happen before it was too late." After they finished discussing all the details of last night, Abraham and Gary headed back to their room to rest. It would take them a couple of days to feel better. Out of all four of them, Mary sustained fewer injuries. She only hit head against a rock and knocked unconscious. "She'll feel better by tomorrow." They were once again alone. She scooted closer to his body, ignoring that the bed squeaked its protest again. In some odd way, she had this overwhelming need to mold her body against him. Ryker didn't seem to mind at all. In fact, he held her tighter against his body. Lifting her head, Mary looked up at her mate, only to find him already looking down at her. The amount of love and affection reflected in his eyes made her heart swell. Was she dreaming? Was this really happening? She never thought that she would be here. To have a male look at her like she was the center of his world. But when she looked at him, she knew. She knew that he loved her. "I love you." The words slipped past her like nothing. A soft smile curved on his lips and a twinkle appeared in his eyes. "I love you too." Lifting one of her hand, she threaded her fingers through his jet black hair and then moved to cradle one side of his face. His stubble beard ticked her palm. Then she dropped her gaze from his perfectly shaped lips. Damn. Staring at his lips stirred a hungry, primal need in her. He must have seen the direction of her thoughts because his eyes darkened with desire. She leaned forward and pressed her lips against his. The minute their lips touched, She sighed. Mary moved closer, needing more. She deepened the kiss, and he allowed her to take charge, taking whatever she wanted from him. She was careful not to touch any of his injuries or lay her body too much over his. When Ryker couldn't take it any longer, a throaty growl rippled from his chest before his own hand tangled in her hair and he took control. She moaned in happiness. The feeling of his lips against her overpowered her senses. She knew they couldn't do more than just kiss, but it was just what she needed to calm her nerves. A silent reminder that all of this was real. When Mary pulled away, she looked back up at him. There was a shine in his hazel eyes. He was thinking about something. What are you thinking about? She asked him openly. Her fingers moved to drum on his chest to keep herself busy. She liked the feel of his hard body underneath hers. How terrified I was to see you in the arms of my enemies. He looked down at her with a little wrinkle between his brows. She moved to smooth it back. With Lottie, we went through a lot of terrifying situations. We smuggled goods and did foul deeds. Along the way, someone would always get injured. I've seen Lottie in a similar situation, but the fear that spread through me that night was incomparable to what I felt last night. I felt every inch of my body was being on fire. Physical pain. My heart tightened and the air in my chest disappeared. I couldn't think or breathe. Maybe it's the mate bond. Mary responded. He shook his head and leaned down to nuzzle her neck, breathing in her scent slowly. His entire being shuddered, and she knew that he was kidding. He was afraid that night. I didn't love her the way I loved you. Maybe there was a time that it was love, but it could also be the fact that I couldn't face reality. I couldn't accept responsibility. Maybe it was infatuation. I don't know. The only thing I know is that my love for you, it started the night you kissed me at the mating ball. Why you couldn't even see me. Mary frowned. People will say that I put a spell on you. He arched a brow in confusion. Ryker, I'd always been a wallflower. I've always known that I was a pretty flower. Males don't look at me. I shouldn't have jumped you that night. I seduced you and it was right of me. I was just so frustrated. One corner of his lips lifted. He moved to smooth back behind her ear. You pulled me in with the courage to seek what you wanted. And little by little, I fell a bit more. It was your love and affection. The way you cared for everyone. Before I knew it. I couldn't let you go. I made excuses to keep you near and grew possessive when others wanted to claim you. I didn't want to lose you. Mary's heart swelled in her chest. You didn't put a spell on me. Others might look for a pretty flower, but all I need is my little wallflower. For those who truly want to find the diamond in the rough, all they need to do is look further than what is in front of them. If anything, I'm lucky to have snatched you from because you are one of a kind. My mate. My little wallflower mate. Ryker kissed her right after, with an amount of ferocity that had her shivering with need. Her heart crying out for him. This was it. Her happily after that she was seeking. This was proof that even the plainest, most average female could still be found. Loved, and cherished. At the log, staring at his little brother, Ryker had the sudden urge to punch the smugness out of his face. He has been wearing that look for the past few months and it was beginning to irritate the fuck out of Ryker. When Abraham found out that Mary had initially wanted to kiss first, he couldn't let it go. Surprised at first, but that quickly went away. In its place was constant teasing. Walking over to Ryker's side, Abraham jabbed his elbow into Ryker's side. There was a cocky smile on his face. Imagine this, Ryker rolled his eyes at his brother. If Mary kissed me instead of you, you wouldn't have met her. She would have been mine. Ryker growled displeasingly, glaring at him. He was treading on thin ice. And this ice was as thin as paper. Abraham chuckled and jabbed Ryker again. Bro, imagine this. Imagine me kicking your fucking ass. Ryker snarled. Abraham burst out laughing. At that moment, Ryker considered punching him for real. Maybe it would make him shut up for once. Just as Ryker was going to do just that. The surgical doors opened, and Marcus stepped out. He wore a teal hospital gown and mask. ripping the mask off. He took a deep breath. How did it go? Ryker asked, completely forgetting about his brother's taunting. Good. Shess safe and the twins are safe. Mary peeked around the corner behind Marcus and Ryker's attention immediately shifted to her. She had left Ryker and Abraham alone to go to the restroom. When they had heard that her sister-in-law was in labor, they hurried over to Alpha Ivan's land in the middle of the night. She didn't even have time to dress properly. His little mate rushed around their bedroom, grabbing clothes and stuffing into a bag. On the way here, she tied her hair up into a messy bun and threw on one of his sweaters. It hid what was underneath. She was about 5 months along already. Mary walked right over and stood next to her brother. Can you believe it? Twins. Mary beamed at her brother. A look of horror flashed across his face before he ran a hand down his face. I don't know how we are going to do it. You'll be fine, Mary insisted, but obviously she could see how exhausted her brother looked. How about I stay and help you around the house? Ryker stiffened immediately, his eyes flying to Mary. She must be crazy. She was already 5 months along. He was going to leave her behind. She seemed to have sensed where his thoughts were heading because her eyes slid over to him and a gentle smile spread across her face. It'll be fine, she drawled. One word. But Marcus Ryker moved to pull her into his arms. He wrapped his arms tightly around her and placed a hand on her belly, pressing an affectionate kiss to the top of her head, and then he pressed his face against hers. You'll not be staying. You are 5 months along. I'm more protective than ever. You'll drive me crazy every second of the day. It would worry me non-stop. Mary. Yes, right. Mary. You can't stay. I felt the same way with Donnie. I can't allow you to do this. Marcus was shaking his head at her. But you look so exhausted, she argued. I am. Extremely. It's been rough, Marcus admitted. Ryker took pity on him. He could see that his mate wanted to help. It was a typical reaction from her. How about I take the 2 oldest? They could come back with us. Get used to the fresh air. Learn a few things. That's not a bad idea, Mary said. Abraham shrugged his shoulders. Up in the mountains could teach them a few tricks in controlling their wolves, and they could run freely with no worries. Marcus nodded his agreement. He looked hesitant but realized quickly that he needed the help. As soon as Donnie and I are settled in, well, come grab the boys. Don't worry about bonding time. We'll be here for a week. They boys will have time to meet their 2 little brothers. Boys. Marcus shook his head like he couldn't believe he had a house filled with boys. Mary hugged him before walking over to me. She slipped her arms around my waist. A minute later, she yawned out loud. We need to get you to bed. I know. I'm so tired. She yawned again. There were circles under her eyes. Ryker slipped his arms underneath her and swept her up into his arms. She didn't bother fighting. Mary rested her head on his shoulders and her eyes fluttered closed. It has been a long drive here and waiting to hear about Donnie's C-section. It was already the next day already. Even Ryker was feeling a little tired. He should take her back to rest. Thank you for coming. Marcus nodded to Ryker. Ryker nodded his head before turning and walking out with his mate. Abraham followed closely behind. It's been months since the attack on their back. With Bruno's death, Gary took over Bruno's role. He manages the border patrol. Everything has been going smoothly. Their business and investments were increasing in profits. Mary was still working at the restaurant with Easton was still a sore subject for Ryker, but he was willing to work with the male because of Mary. But there was one subject that concerned Ryker. His eyes drifted to his brother. Although Abraham seemed content in working along with Ryker, Ryker wanted to see him happy and mated. Obviously, his brother had no intentions of going out and looking for one. The next mating ball was coming up. Maybe he'll talk to Abraham and see if he would like to attend. Who knows? He may just find what he needs. Gods know that Ryker never thought he would until he met Mary. He looked down at his mate and felt an overwhelming sense of contentment. He never knew he would get here. To have a mate and a baby. To be loved. But in his arms was the female of his dreams. his little mate and Luna, leaning down. He brushed his lips against hers. She softly sighed and snuggled closer to him. He smiled at her reaction and tightened his arms around her before moving his lips to her forehead. I love you, he whispered. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.